My best friend of 15 years ghosted me after I made money. What happened next will shock you. First of all, I want to tell you about the last normal conversation I had with my best friend. We were sitting in the same diner. We'd been going to since we were 19. Same booth, same terrible coffee, same way he laughed with his whole body. At something I said that wasn't even that funny. It was a Wednesday in February. I told him about the deal I just closed, the one that changed my financial situation, in a way I still hadn't fully processed. He said, "That's incredible, man. I'm so proud of you." He meant it. I could tell. Or I thought I could tell. I drove home that night thinking about how lucky I was. Great career momentum. And a best friend who had been there for literally every chapter of my life. Since we were 19 years old. 15 years. Every apartment. Every breakup. Every failed business idea. Every 2 a.m. phone call. Every worst day. He was there for all of it. Until he wasn't. The first text I sent after that Wednesday went unanswered for 3 days. I figured he was busy. The second one, a week later, same thing. The third one I sent with a specific question, so he'd have to respond. He didn't. That was 4 years ago. In those 4 years, I found out the truth about why he disappeared. And I want to tell you, the ghosting was almost the easy part. I debated telling this story for a long time. Not because I'm angry. I'm not, or at least not anymore. But because friendship betrayal is different from every other kind of betrayal I've talked about on this channel. When a business partner steals from you, you get angry and you get legal. When a boss takes credit for your work, you get strategic. When a family member overlooks you, you get clear. When your best friend of 15 years disappears the moment your life gets better, you don't get angry, you get confused. And then you get very, very quiet. Because the question you can't stop asking yourself is, was any of it real? That question, and the answer I eventually found, is what this story is really about. Let's go back to the beginning. Marcus and I met freshman year of college. He was my roommate. Random assignment, the kind of thing that either produces a lifelong friend or a very awkward 8 months. For us, it was the first thing. We were different in almost every measurable way. He was an extrovert who collected people. I was quieter, more internal, needed time to warm up. He was studying communications. I was in business. He partied. I studied. And yet somehow we became the kind of friends who could sit in the same room, not talking for 2 hours, and call it a good afternoon. The effortless kind. The rare kind. We graduated the same year. Both moved back to the same city by coincidence. Or maybe design, I'm still not sure, and stayed close through all of it. His string of almost relationships. My 2 serious ones, including the one that ended badly. His career false starts, 3 different industries, before he settled into something that fit. My own false starts, the failed app, the startup that ran out of runway. The 2 years where I was honestly not sure what I was building or why. Through all of it, Marcus, he was the person I called when my startup folded. I remember sitting in my empty office at 11 p.m. on a Thursday, surrounded by the things I was going to have to sell, and calling him. He drove 40 minutes to bring me food and sit with me until 2 a.m. He didn't try to fix anything. He just sat there. That's who he was to me. That's what 15 years looked like. So when I tell you that his disappearance broke something in me that took a long time to repair, I need you to understand the full weight of what I'm saying. This wasn't a casual friend who drifted away. This was the person who drove 40 minutes at 11 p.m. to sit in an empty office with me. And then one February, he was gone. The first month, I told myself he was going through something. Marcus had a history of going internal when life got hard. It wasn't unusual for him to pull back for a few weeks. I gave him space. I checked in once a week. Nothing intrusive. The second month, I started to feel the shift. Our mutual friends were still hearing from him. He was still showing up to things. He was just not showing up to things with me. I sent him a direct message in month 2. that I'm going to read to you exactly as I wrote it. Hey, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like something has changed between us. If I did something, I genuinely want to know. You don't have to protect me from it. Just talk to me. He read it. I could see the read receipt. He didn't respond. That was the moment I stopped, giving him the benefit of the doubt. Not because I was angry, but because a read receipt, with no response to a message like that, is itself a message. Month 3, I reached out one final time. A phone call, not a text, a call. It went to voicemail. I left a message. Short, calm, no pressure. Just, I'm here if you want to talk. No hard feelings either way. He never called back. I spent a long time in the months that followed, running through every interaction we'd had. In the weeks before the diner that Wednesday, had I said something offensive? Had I been a bad friend without realizing it? Had success changed me in ways I couldn't see? I interrogated myself thoroughly and honestly, and I kept arriving at the same answer. No, the only thing that had changed was the deal I'd told him about. That Wednesday in February. I didn't want to believe that. I didn't want to be the person who assumed their success drove people away. That felt arrogant, self-centered. But the timeline was undeniable. And then 14 months after that last phone call, someone told me the truth. And the truth was so much worse than anything I had imagined. The person who told me was a mutual friend. I'll call her Diana. Diana and I had stayed close, even after Marcus disappeared from my orbit. She was careful about loyalty. She didn't gossip, didn't triangulate, wasn't the kind of person who stirred things. So when she called me and said, I need to tell you something about Marcus, and I've been sitting on it for 6 months, because I wasn't sure it was my place. I knew it was real. What Diana told me over the next hour rearranged everything I thought I understood about the previous 15 years. It started with money. Apparently, in the months before that Wednesday in February, around the time my career was starting to gain real traction, Marcus had begun talking about me to their shared friends. In a specific way. Not obviously. Not cruelly. Subtly. Small comments. He's changed, you know. Success does that to people. I worry about him. He's becoming someone different. I don't know if I recognize him anymore. None of it pointed at. All of it consistent. Over months. Building a quiet, persistent narrative. That I was becoming someone to be concerned about. Someone whose success was a character flaw in disguise. But Diana hadn't called to tell me about the comments. She called to tell me about the conversation she had overheard at a birthday party 4 months earlier. Marcus talking to 2 of our mutual friends, people I'd known for a decade, telling them that the deal I'd closed had actually been built on an idea that he'd given me years ago, in passing, in a conversation he claimed I had used without acknowledging him. He was telling people, quietly, consistently, with the casual confidence of someone who believes they won't be challenged, that my success had roots in something he deserved credit for, that I had, essentially, taken something from him. Diana said the 2 people listening had nodded slowly in the way people do, when they're not sure whether to believe something, but don't want to seem dismissive. She had sat with that for 4 months. Then she called me. I asked her one question when she finished. How long has he been saying this? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I think since before you closed the deal. I think he started the moment he saw it coming. I sat with that. The friend who drove 40 minutes at 11 p.m. The friend I had called from my empty office. The friend who sat with me until 2 a.m. while I figured out what came next. That friend had watched me start to build something real, and instead of celebrating it, had begun, quietly, methodically, building a story that reframed my success as something he was owed a piece of. And when I closed that deal, when the success became undeniable, he couldn't maintain both the friendship and the narrative. So he chose the narrative, and he ghosted me, because staying in my life would have required him to either stop lying or to look me in the eye while he did it. He chose a third option. He chose to just disappear and let the story he'd been building do the work of explaining why. I'm going to be honest with you about what came next, because I think people expect a pivot here, the moment where clarity arrives and the rebuild begins, and everything becomes purposeful and strategic. That's not what happened. What happened is that I grieved. Not loudly, not dramatically, but genuinely, because what Diana told me didn't just explain the ghosting. It retroactively changed the texture of 15 years. I found myself going back through memories and asking uncomfortable questions. When he said he was proud of me, did he mean it? When he sat with me in that empty office, was that genuine love, or was he cataloging a moment he could use later as evidence of his investment in me? I don't know the answer to those questions. I still don't. And I've made peace with not knowing, because I think the truth is probably somewhere complicated. People are not simply good or simply bad. Marcus had been a real friend, I believe that, and somewhere along the way, something in him had curdled. Jealousy is like that. It doesn't announce itself. It develops slowly in the dark, until one day you look at someone you love and realize you've been resenting them for longer than you can account for. I didn't confront Marcus. I want to be clear about that decision and why I made it. Confronting him would have required him to either admit what he'd been doing, which he wouldn't, or to deny it, which would have made things worse. There was no version of that conversation that gave me anything I actually needed. What I needed was not an explanation from him. What I needed was to decide what the truth meant about how I was going to move forward. So I made 3 decisions. Decision 1. I told the people Marcus had been talking to, quietly, without drama, without asking them to choose sides, what had actually happened. Not to destroy his reputation, to correct a false record. There's a difference. Decision 2. I invested every unit of social and emotional energy I had previously spent on that friendship into the relationships in my life that were unambiguous. The people who had celebrated without an agenda. The people who had been happy for me, in that clean, simple way that genuine care looks like. I had 3 of those people. 3 turned into 6. 6 turned into 12. When you stop maintaining a friendship that was quietly costing you more than you knew, you discover you have a great deal more to give to the ones that weren't. Decision 3, and this is the one that surprised me most. I decided to use what happened as a diagnostic tool. Not for the past, for the future. Because the truth is, Marcus had seen the success coming before I felt certain of it. He'd started repositioning the narrative before the deal even closed, which meant he was paying more attention to what I was building than I had realized. And if someone who resented my trajectory was watching it that carefully, then the trajectory was real. I stopped second-guessing the success. I stopped the imposter syndrome that had been quietly running in the background of every achievement. The person who had the most reason to want me to fail had confirmed through his own behavior that I was actually succeeding. That was the strangest gift, wrapped in the worst packaging imaginable. But a gift. For years later, the business that Marcus had told people he'd inspired, the one built on the idea he claimed partial credit for, has grown by a multiple I genuinely could not have predicted. When I closed that first deal, I have a team of 14 people. We've worked with clients in 9 countries. We have a reputation in our industry that took years to build and is now largely impossible to misrepresent. There is no quiet narrative that can reframe it. The work speaks too clearly. Marcus, from what I understand through people we still share, is fine. He is living his life. He has his community, his routines, his version of things. I bear him no ill will. I mean that, not because what he did was acceptable. It wasn't. Creating a false narrative about someone's success. Poisoning mutual friendships with a story designed to elevate yourself. That's a genuine betrayal. It deserves to be named clearly. But ill will requires ongoing energy. And I stopped spending energy on Marcus. The day Diana called me, what I kept, what I carry from this, is a calibration, a much clearer sense of what genuine support looks like, of how people behave when they're happy for you, versus when they're performing happiness while building resentment, of what 15 years can and cannot guarantee, and of the fact that the most dangerous person in your life is sometimes not the obvious enemy, it's the friend in the third row, who is clapping just slightly too hard. To be entirely sincere, watch for the people who ask about your success, with slightly more questions than celebration, who give compliments that somehow circle back to themselves, who are most interested in your progress, at the moments when it threatens to exceed their own. I'm not saying those people are Marcus. Most of them are just human, navigating their own insecurities imperfectly, but some of them are, and the difference is visible if you learn to look. Here is what I want you to leave with. Friendship is not insured by history. 15 years does not protect you from being hurt by the person those 15 years were spent with, and being hurt by a friend, a real one, someone you genuinely loved, is a specific kind of loss that doesn't have a clean name. It's not a breakup. It's not a falling out. It's a slow revision of a story you thought you had already finished reading. I think the most honest thing I can say about Marcus is this: he was a real friend to me, right up until the point where being my friend required him to be genuinely happy for me. That's the limit he couldn't clear. That limit is in a lot of people. Most of them never get tested enough to reveal it. Marcus got tested, and I found out. And knowing, even though the knowing hurt, is better than not knowing, because I spent 15 years believing I had something I didn't quite have, and now I know exactly what I have. And it is, person by person, so much more solid. If you've lost a friend to your own success, if you've watched someone disappear, the moment your life started to look like something they wanted, I see you. That specific loneliness is real, and it deserves to be talked about more than it is. Leave a comment. Tell me your version.